Welcome back, Focus Learners, to The Explainer. Today we're jumping right into something I find absolutely fascinating. We're going to treat this like a mini masterclass, taking four completely distinct, profound philosophical texts and synthesizing them into one big journey. We're looking at human defense mechanisms, the nature of creation, and what it actually means to be present. Because really, the core question driving all of this is, what have we truly learned about the self? I mean, seriously, who is the I that tears itself apart? I want you to take a second right now and just look inward. We all have this, right? This internal civil war where your mind is aggressively pulling you one way and your body is dragging you another. We tell ourselves, I just want peace, but our actions, they create all this friction. So you have to ask, who is actually the captain of this chaotic ship? Okay, let's dive into this with what might be the most deeply relatable metaphor ever: the tragedy of the banana in your bag. Have you ever been frantically searching around for a snack, just completely ignoring the perfectly good, ripe piece of fruit you literally packed for yourself? It's ridiculous, but it's not just about food. This is a profoundly human habit. We are constantly craving something outside of ourselves to fix our internal tension. And in the process, we actively refuse to look at the abundance we already have right there in the bag. So that brings us to section one, the illusion of creation. To really understand this internal tension, we actually have to step back and look at how we interact with the physical world. We tend to think of creating as generating matter out of thin air, like pure magic. But it's not. The universe is a closed system. All the atoms are already here. You and I don't add net new stuff to the universe. We just borrow it. The true act of generating something isn't about conjuring matter from nothing. It's about drawing a line where there wasn't one before. It's what the mathematician George Spencer Brown called the first cut, taking what already exists and adding a new distinction. The massive takeaway here is that novelty, the site of newness, lives entirely in the arrangement. Think about it. The property of wetness doesn't actually exist in an isolated hydrogen atom, right? Or oxygen for that matter. A beautiful melody doesn't exist inside a single isolated piano key. Creation happens through the arranging of those parts. And if you follow this logic deep enough, the seam between creating something new and simply rearranging old stuff, it completely disappears. Which leads to this beautifully humbling but honestly really empowering truth. The one doing the arranging is itself an arrangement. The author, meaning you, me, any creator trying to stand outside their work, we're borrowed material too. You are literally just an arrangement of the universe. Honestly, recognizing this completely strips away that crushing pressure to be some isolated, sovereign creator god. You aren't separate from the weave, you're just part of it. Moving on to section two, the architecture of loneliness. Since we're all just these borrowed arrangements trying to connect, we really need to look at our communication stock. Usually, we look at communication top-down. We think loneliness is just the sad result of a message failing to land. But I want you to invert the telescope here. Look at the ground floor. Loneliness isn't a glitch. It is the generative furnace. It's the engine. That inherent separation between me and you creates the voltage that forces us to build this massive, complicated scaffolding. Imagination, syntax, protocol. We construct this whole tower just to try and touch another mind. And what's standing in our way? Entropy. Claude Shannon's information theory shows us that entropy guarantees you're going to get some leakage or noise in any translation. It's physics. You can literally never transmit your internal state to someone else with 100% fidelity. But here is the wild paradox about entropy. It's the tax we pay on communication, yes, but it's also the exact condition that makes communication necessary in the first place. Your feeling of isolation isn't because you aren't trying hard enough. It's just the structural reality of two separate minds trying to cross an impossible void. Now, knowing the math behind our separation doesn't magically cure the feeling, but I think it weaves this profound sense of meaning into the gap. The messages are broken. They always will be. The translation is going to leak. But the reaching, the simple fact that we build the tower anyway, just to try and confirm gravity with another mind, that reaching is the whole miracle. Let's turn to section three, the thinking contradiction. So what happens when all that intense reaching turns inward on ourselves? Think about the Taoist ideal of Wu Wei, effortless action. Imagine a person who is just desperately trying to isolate themselves to achieve this perfect, natural, quiet state. But they're using their mind to force it. It's like trying to break physics by obeying physics. They are literally issuing effortlessness by executive order, and it creates this incredibly tense, agonizingly effortful attempt to be effortless. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the hall of mirrors it maps out. We declare out loud that we want peace and quiet, but we do it so loudly, seeking all this validation. The mind absolutely loves creating artificial problems just so it has something to solve. It's an analytical trap. We get completely stuck in a loop, trying to outthink a feeling. The ancient Taoist parable of Hundan perfectly captures how dangerous this is. Hundan was the emperor of primordial chaos. He had no face, no sensory organs, but he was perfectly complete. Well, his well-meaning friends decided they needed to help him by boring holes into his head so he could see and hear like they did. And what happened? He died. Our helpful analysis, that constant relentless need to categorize and drill into our raw emotions, it often acts like that violent drilling. It just destroys our natural, undifferentiated vitality. Which leads right into the ultimate trap, the infinite regress of wanting not to want. You know the feeling. You decide, I just want to stop wanting things. But wanting to end all desires is literally a massive desire itself. It's a total Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. The intellect swallows its own instrument, and we just end up exhausted by our own self-improvement projects. Which brings us to Section 4, the load-bearing shrug. When that internal war gets to be too much, we build these massive psychological defenses. A really common one is defensive indifference. We put on this mask and say, so what, or who cares? But guys, this is a load-bearing shrug. It takes a continuous, exhausting amount of effort to maintain this illusion that you are completely unbothered. It's like injecting emotional Novocaine just to avoid the possibility of disappointment. Contrast that with a real release, which is entirely spontaneous and quiet. True freedom doesn't ever need to loudly introduce itself and tell everyone in the room how much it doesn't care. This defensive shrug is largely fueled by what Buddhist philosophy calls the dukkha pattern. Here's how it works. Step 1, you crave what is absent, the want other. Step 2, you actively devalue what is currently in your hand, the neglect have. Remember the banana in the bag? We do this because realizing we actually have enough right now is terrifying to the ego. It means you lose your identity as a seeker. So how do we stop forcing things? We have to return to true Wu Wei, not as some forced, isolated retreat, but as simply following the natural grain of things. Think of the famous parable of Butcher Ding. His knife never dulled in 19 years. Why? Because he didn't hack at the bone. He guided his blade through the big, natural hollows of the ox. It's about moving through the hollows of your own life with less interference. Not necessarily less effort, but finding the path of least resistance instead of constantly clenching your will against reality. And finally, Section 5. What have we learned? So as we come back up for air from this deep dive into the human psyche, let's go back to our hook. Who is the I that tears itself apart? The answer, and what we've really learned here today, lies in the concept of anatta, or no self. There is no solid captain trapped behind the wheel in the storm of your mind. The conflict, the internal tearing itself, is the temporary constellation that we call I. Once you recognize that, it just dissolves the need to fiercely defend a fixed identity, because that fixed entity doesn't actually exist. You see, logic is never going to resolve the thinking contradiction. The real truth here is somatic. It happens in the physical body. There's this poem that explores all this tension, and after lines and lines of agonizing intellectual effort, the speaker just ends with a single word, funny. That involuntary laugh, it's a nervous system exhale. It completely bypasses all the loud noise in your skull. It is the exact moment the mammal finally wins over the monk, and by giving up the fight, Wu Wei is accidentally achieved. Ultimately, you have to start using your own nervous system as a compass. We have to stop asking if our philosophy is logically sound and start asking what it actually does to our physical body. When you adopt a certain mindset, does it act as insulation, rigidly closing you off from the world? Or does it act as liberation, opening your hands so you can actually participate in reality? So I'm going to leave you with this final thought today. The next time you try to convince yourself that you don't care or that you want absolutely nothing at all, just pause. Ask yourself, when you say you want nothing, does your body open or does it close? Just sit with that somatic reality for a bit. Thanks for exploring this with us.